It is Saturday the 13th of August 2022. I don't think there's anywhere on the planet at the moment that isn't suffering from inflation, fuel shortages and so on. And the impact that's had on us has been limited, but there is still an impact on us. We're not fully self-sufficient yet. We still have to rely on diesel powered vehicle. We have to rely on the electricity companies to top up our supply, because we're not quite 100% on that. We are about 75% of our electricity is generated ourselves. So one of the other big areas that we've had an impact on is the cost of feed for the chickens, and we were getting through a huge amount of it. One of our plans had always been to look for ways to make us self-sufficient in animal feed, as well as with just the supply of eggs. So, what have we done about it? Well, recently we went out and picked a load of rowan, and we tested that out on the chickens. And rowan is a berry. I'll show you some in a minute. It's a berry that grows on trees around where we live, and it's quite accessible. It's easy to pick, and I've just picked 3 bucket loads of that. But a few weeks ago we tested it out on the chickens, and they seemed okay with it. They weren't massively keen, but they seemed okay with it. We've also started to pick apples as well. Now, people give us apples to give to the goats through the winter. Now we're looking at feeding them to the chickens as well. So we've had a few days this week where we've been testing out feeding apples to the chickens, and they love them, absolutely love them. So I've come down to Watergate Park, which is a park just a couple of miles down from our farm, and it is full of very accessible rowan trees. So rowan, bright red berries that are in huge bunches, and as I say, I've just picked 3 bucket loads of these, and they're going to be fed to the chickens through the week, along with apples as well. So 1 bucket there, and a couple of buckets there. It had always been our aim to be as self-sufficient as we could be with the animal feeds as well. We've more or less cracked that with the goats, because we can go foraging for them, or now that we've got the new fields on the farm, we can actually put them out to graze. And obviously we've got the hay crop, huge hay crop, which will keep them going through the winter as well. But we had to make do until recently with paying increased costs for our chicken feed. It had always been our aim to produce our own chicken feed. The national circumstances and international circumstances have now forced us to actually get that organised. So hopefully we'll be able to phase out, or at least reduce considerably, the amount of feed that we have to buy in for the chickens, and feed which has gone up at least 25% in price in the last few weeks. As you can see, still loads of berries on the trees, but the clock is ticking on this, because they may last a few more weeks, but in the current climate they will start rotting on there if they're not eaten by the birds or picked by us. So ticking clock on this one. Now, this is one of the hedges on our farm in between goat paddock 1 and 2, although the goats are free to move between them. But as you can see, the hedge is full of crabapple trees, and they're absolutely heaving with fruit. So this year has been very odd for the weather. Parts of England are in drought at the moment. We've had a little bit more rain than we have down south, but I don't think we're going to have enough for the main apple crop to fatten up. because the crab apples, they really are just small, so good for dry conditions. But it's going to be a few weeks yet before we know whether the main apple crop is worth picking for eating for ourselves, or whether it all has to go for use as chicken and goat feed. The goats also like the hedge for the shade, so it's considerably cooler under the tree canopy, the hedge canopy, than it is out where I'm standing at the moment. Of course, having the goats around here whilst I was picking apples wasn't the easiest of jobs, so I did manage to make off with quite a few of my apples. Right, 3 buckets of crab apples picked. Most will go for chicken feed and duck feed, but we'll use some of it to make into a bramble jelly, although I've got to pick the blackberries first. But the blackberries are early this year, so and they look quite abundant as well. Right, well, I am not entirely sure that this experiment of giving the chickens and ducks unchopped crab apples is working, because the first thing I spotted is that they are too big and hard for the ducks, and when the chickens peck at them, it's like playing a game of marbles. So I think I'm going to have to go back and chop up the crab apples and come back and feed them again. Through the week, although I was feeding them apples, they were large crab apples and they were chopped, so it made it easier for the chickens and ducks to deal with them. Well, I spent half an hour or so chopping those little crab apples up, and I've fed them to them, and they are finding it easier, but I was thinking, life's too short to chop a crab apple. So I think in future we'll look at simmering the apples for a bit. I'm trying to avoid increasing energy bills or increasing the use of our solar electricity, but I think it's just going to have to be done, because my fear is that if we don't do that, if we don't get them chopped or reduced down in some way, then the ducks and the chickens just aren't going to eat them.